With the intelligence gained about who we are, what we are doing here, comes the feeling of responsibility for others. We know then that we are not independent of others but interlinked with each other. Some years back, there was a epidemic of tuberculosis in Tamil Nadu, in South India. Finally, medicine were found and the epidemic was contained. The officials responsible for eradicating it proudly claimed that they were the ones responsible for curing it. But they did take up the responsibility for the fact that it was allowed to spread all over the town in the first place? No. They were actually responsible for allowing the tuberculosis to spread also, right? They should have prevented it to begin with and not just taken credit for managing the crisis. Likewise, in our life, we claim responsibility for anything good that happens, but we don't take responsibility for anything bad that happens. We take up responsibility with discrimination. Only if we take up responsibility for everything that happens in our life, we will start growing. Vivekananda beautifully says, take as much responsibility as you can shoulder. The more responsibility you take, the more you expand. Expansion is the only growth. Without expansion, you will contract and die. A small story. Once a man was giving talk on responsibility at charity club. He gave an example of what happened a few days back. He said, a friend and I were talking down the street towards the park when saw a helpless man lying unconscious on the road. He paused and looked at the concerned faces of the audience. Then he continued. Nobody had bothered to help him. Not only that, when we came back after our walk, the poor man was still lying there. Instead of blaming others, let us look into ourselves and see what we are doing about the problem. The more responsibility you take up, the more you grow. Only when you feel responsible for all that is happening around you, do you become a leader. Until then, you are just a follower. When you feel compassion towards others, suffering, the whole things take the shape of responsibility and express itself as energy. That's all. For that matter, when anyone takes up the responsibility of suffering, they will immediately start radiating energy. Be very clear. You can stand up only if you feel responsible for people's growth. Only if you feel responsible for uplifting them. When you can say that you will do whatever you can for people, when you stand up with a responsibility to expand and the divine energy flows through you. Contemplate on this concept so that you can deeply understand it. When you are free from ego and stand up with responsibility, the expansion happens and you become like the bamboo flute. Then, just as the air enters the bamboo, leaves it as music, so too will the air that enters you flow through you as energy. A cognitive shift. When you take up responsibility, a cognitive shift happens in you. Your mental setup changes. Many of us live life like slaves. For example, if you work 8 hours in your office, just following orders, you will feel dull and tired. Instead of take up responsibility and initiative, that same 8 hours will become much easier and more enjoyable. For example, take the case of a person who is running his own business and another person who is working for a company. The owner of the business has the full responsibility of his business, but the person who is working for some or the other company does not really feel the full responsibility. If he does not feel the responsibility, the whole job becomes like a burden on him. There is a little or no self-motivation. He keeps looking at his watch to see if the time is up for leaving. For him, only the first of every month is sweet since it's the payday. In a month, he sacrifices 29 days of his life for one day of joy. A sense of personal responsibility can help turn around any situation. A sense of personal responsibility can achieve great things. When you stand up with responsibility, you become a solid force. Until then, you remain a burden for yourself and others. We often think that we are in an ordinary job. We wonder why we should take up more responsibility when our higher authorities at work are not doing so. Let me tell you, in an office, when the janitor does all his duties perfectly, he will inspire people. You see, the head of the organization has to be responsible. No credit is given to him for that. But someone in a lesser position demonstrating such responsibility is a true inspiration. There is a greater chance of people at the lower post inspiring others through their sense of responsibility than people at a higher level doing so. So don't wait to get some authority to become responsible. Secondly, don't think that you are in a lesser post and therefore you need not to be responsible. Thirdly, allow the cognitive shift happen in you. There is a beautiful story about Buddha. It is said that when Buddha went to beg, he would appear like a king, and the kings who gave him alms would appear like beggars. Appearing like a beggar or a king is not because of your status or the property that you own. It is because of the state inside you. When you take up responsibility for the entire cosmos, you will expand and look like a leader. You will become a leader. Even if a leader sits on his throne and does not take responsibility, but instead points his finger at other people for responsibility, he will appear small. The state is that which gets the status. The status can never get the state. Ego versus responsibility. When you stand up feeling responsible, your problems will dissolve. A new intelligence will awaken in you. Don't think you are being egoistic. Ego is different from responsibility. When you feel responsible, you will take the initiative. You will not feel egoistic. Only when you feel that you would have done better than other person will ego come into play. When ego comes into play, you will not take up responsibility, trust and patience. I always tell people, do not think you have a certain amount of energy and you will work according to that energy. No, whatever work and responsibility you take up, the energy starts expressing accordingly. You will have the energy according to the responsibilities whichever you take up. Whatever responsibility you take upon yourself, you will see that inner space expands to that extent and energy flows through you. If you feel responsible for whatever is happening around you, you suddenly become a leader. You start transforming your life and others' lives. Responsibility is one of the way to consciously grow. You only need to do two things. Trust that life is good and know that you can expand to the responsibilities that you take up. Another thing, when that expansion happens, just hold and have patience during the transformation process. Patience during the transformation process is what is called as tapa or penance. There is a beautiful phrase in teachings of Shirdi Sai Baba, which is Shraddha Saburi, trust and patience. This is the essence of life. Why don't we allow big breakthroughs in our life? Because we don't trust that life leads us into a new space. Have trust and patience. The simple truth is that when you take up more responsibility, you just expand and more energy starts expressing through you. Understand? Enlightenment comes with a tremendous responsibility. It comes with a tremendous pressured compassion. Pressured is the right word to use here. Your whole being will be vibrating with an intense compassion, with a very deep compassion. Let me tell you one incident. Early morning, Swami Vivekananda suddenly got up and said, I have a deep pain in the right hand. At that time, he was lying down on a bed. He said, on this side of the ocean, some country is suffering from some natural calamity. Please find out where we are needed and send our Swamis to go and do the relief work to help people. The next morning they received the news that there was an earthquake on a nearby island. All the Swamis rushed to do the relief work. Swami Vivekananda was sensitive to and actually felt the pain felt by people so many miles away. With enlightenment, practically the whole cosmos is felt inside your body. A deep pressured compassion lands on you along with the enlightenment experience. Understand? It is a great responsibility. It is not just freedom. It is a great responsibility too. Most of us wait for the status to come in order to take up the responsibility. Be very clear. It doesn't work that way. Only if you take up responsibility will the status come. Those who wait for the status will not take up responsibility even after they get the status. They will simply find another reason or excuse, that's all. Be very clear. Responsibility is consciousness. Many people think that if they get enlightened, they will get a golden throne. They think that somebody will give them food and a place to stay. They think that people will worship them, their photographs. If you see the status of the enlightened master and try to achieve enlightenment for that, you will feel cheated. If you see the state of the enlightened master and try to achieve it, you will be successful. You will be happy. You will enjoy it. That is the difference between state and status. When we become responsible for others, we no longer are focused on us. We move towards serving other people. Serving other people is leadership. Pandering to one's own needs without a care about others is absence of leadership. There are so many so-called leadership gurus who teach and train people in organizations to develop leadership. Yet, when we look at all organizations, whether they are doing business to make a profit, or in government service, or in the area of social services, true leaders are rare. If you look at any organization, you will find that less than 1% tends to become the so-called leaders in the organization. If you look at businesses, organizations, we can say that there is a probably only 1% of these organizations that can claim to be true leaders in their fields, who are excelling in all areas of their business, making a profit, delivering good products and services, providing services to society, providing satisfaction to their employees, etc. So we can say true leaders are actually 1% of the 1% of successful businesses organization. It means just 0.1% of the overall working population actually has true leadership qualities in them. We can say the same about organizations in other fields. This is what I mean when I say true leaders. True leaders are rare. Most of us achieve the status of a leader, but not the state. State is totally different from status. When you are leading a group of people, if you are forced to take up the responsibility of some department, or if you take the responsibility out of your greed, the status comes. But the status is totally different. When I use the word state, I mean your inner space or your being should be mature enough to handle what you are entering or the responsibility which you are assuming. When we just get the status without achieving the state, all the problems which exist in the corporate world start. Stress and tension in the personal level, and backbiting and politics in the level of the team. All these problems start when you don't achieve the state but just achieve the status. Here I am trying to express to you the truths from the great tradition of the East, how to achieve leader consciousness. How to achieve the state of the leader and not just the status. See, status is very easy. State is something which we really need to achieve. Status will simply follow a man who has achieved the state of a leader. Even if the status takes its own time, he will not be bothered. He will live like a king. His very life will be totally fulfilled. The invaluable feelings of fulfillment happens to beings who achieve leader consciousness. Understanding from Eastern mysticism, impact of engrams on productivity. Billions of dollars are spent by companies globally to enhance human productivity. Most of these efforts are centered on providing new skills specific to training in a particular area of the organization's focus, or improving technology such as use of computer, internet, or other forms of media and communication. Some companies also invest in developing softer skills such as interpersonal skills, team building skills, etc. But most of these trainings tend to address the conscious mind, actions, behavior, and perception that are just on the surface. But over 90% of our emotions and behavior resides deep under the surface of our mind. That is what the psychoanalytic Sigmund Freud calls the unconscious mind. If we look at the mind, there are thoughts and perceptions which are accumulated in our mind at a conscious level. But there are deeper memories and stored knowledge that we use to help us solve our problems. Then there is a whole range of emotions and experiences that are embedded in the unconscious level. This is where the samskaras or the engraved memories reside. Most corporate training programs focus on the conscious mind to impart knowledge or particular skill. But actually it is as though we are sitting on a volcano of emotions that is just waiting to burst and erupt anytime. These hidden emotions are what makes us behave inefficiently and even illogically at times. So, samskaras or engraved memories interfere with the decision making process. These can be called the inefficiency present in the mind. The more the number of engrams, the more clouded in our thought process and the lower is the output. In other words, to produce a particular output, having more samskaras will require more time, people, or cost. So, this results in lower productivity. Well, this is it for today. Thank you for joining. We will see ahead in responsibility part 2. Namaskar.